The question before the House remains that the bill now be read a second time, and the call is to the member for Chifley.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. What we are witnessing today from the Coalition is an attempt to camouflage cowardice. What we're seeing is these sort of after-the-event explanations that are occurring that did not extend to the Australian public any decency as they were leading into the election about what would happen after the election in reference to support for the auto industry. Because bear in mind, as much as you hear today, members of the Coalition suggest that we're doing the right thing, that we can no longer extend this type of assistance, that it's not right for us to be able to support one industry over the other. Remember, prior to the election, they were making out that they would be the friend of the auto worker, that they would be there in tough times to support people. And from no one less than the Prime Minister, who, in the weeks leading into the election itself last year, said, "I want to see car making survive in this country, not just survive, but flourish." There is no way in the world, when you read that quote, or when you reflect on that quote, that there is a suggestion that this will be a piecemeal level of support. This would be, as was suggested by the Coalition, a level of support that would allow the sector to flourish. It would allow the sector to continue. It would ensure that jobs continue in the sector, but the Coalition would be there when the auto sector needed it. And what did we have afterwards? We witnessed a number of things. For instance, knowing that decisions needed to be made by the auto manufacturers by Christmas, instead of backing up the sneaky, I would say now, words that were used to try and basically snare votes from people concerned about the future of the auto sector, instead of backing those commitments up, what we had was the Coalition try and refer things off for further studies, for productivity commission reviews, not there to allow the industry to flourish, not there to allow the industry to survive. They were basically building the edifice, building the framework by which they would stab auto workers in the back, that they would not fulfil the commitment that they made back on the 21st of August 2013, when the then opposition leader, now Prime Minister, was saying he wanted to see car making not just survive, he wanted to see it flourish. And so as a result, we see this bill before the House now, referring to the Automotive Transformation Scheme, which is a legislated scheme encouraging investment and innovation in the sector. And it's supposed to provide the form of support that would be evidenced through co-investment for firms for the production of motor vehicles and engines, and for the investment in eligible R&D and plant and equipment. And this bill amends the Scheme Act of 2009, and we oppose it, and we oppose it strongly, because if it's passed, it will see $500 million cut in funding from the ATS between now and 2017, and it'll effectively terminate the scheme from the end of 2017. No support whatsoever for surviving component companies. And so what does this mean for 200,000 Australian men and women who will rely on the auto manufacturing industry for their jobs? Well, basically we'll see those jobs put under direct threat. And we have argued, the opposition's argued, that it's critical that governments do not preempt the closure of the industry, and that they don't risk the early closure of firms by 2017 through this reduction in funding. The proposed early closure of this scheme, frankly, ignores the fact that dozens of component manufacturing companies employing thousands of workers will still exist. The intention is that they exist post-2017. And so it's absolutely vital that we have this scheme in place so we can work within industry and transition and ensure that we rebuild jobs and maintain capabilities. But this government's not interested in that. This government now, having deceived the Australian public, having effectively, they had no intention of fulfilling their commitment to see this industry survive. And in fact, I was stunned to see the Treasurer of this country stand at that dispatch box and basically goad Holden out of the country, not prepared whatsoever to support those jobs. They now put on this brave face. They don courage now and claim that they want to see public funds spent in a way that industries, they're not picking winners and that they're not there supporting particular industries. But they never had the decency to say that before the election. They never had the decency to look people in the eye and say, we will not be there for you when the crunch comes. And then we have our Treasurer go, GMH, out of the country and refuse to support them. I mean, when you look at this government, what are they actually there to do in terms of supporting the economy? They want to see the end of auto manufacturing. They're happy to see the decline of manufacturing. They're not there for innovation. I mean, you see them now basically pulling back on the NBN, slowing down the rollout, the critical need for us to invest in better broadband infrastructure. We have those on the other side cheer that they'll get mobile phone coverage better, but the actual critical infrastructure of the nation in broadband that will help support the growth of the digital economy as the rest of the world is basically getting ready for the digital era. This government's slowing down the rollout. They're not interested in that level of innovation. On anything that has to do with innovation policy, they're either delaying, avoiding or not making decisions that will help support it. Basically, when it comes to this government, all they want to see this country do is mine stuff, shear stuff and bank stuff, and that's it. They don't have any plan and any notion about where they want to see the economy go into the future. And they're happy to see people's jobs go in the meantime, because they have no direct capacity and no direct plan themselves. I mean, they've made a promise in the now nationally archived Real Solutions document, hidden from public view. They came up shredded, hidden from view, and now in some sort of witness protection program, not to be ever seen the light of day, but they made this commitment for 1 million jobs. It was never done through any economic work. It was merely, as has been evidenced now and as on the public record, basically a plucked up figure. It's basically been picked out of the air. 1 million jobs created, or the intention is to be created by this government. And what have we seen since they've come to office? We've seen unemployment rise higher than what was experienced in this country during the GFC. It's now got a six in front of it, the unemployment figures in this nation, and it's going to stay that way for a considerable period of time. So you'd think that a government which is being confronted by that unemployment figure would actually want to do everything it can to either protect jobs or find new ways of lifting jobs. And what do you see? You see this bill being placed before the parliament. 50,000 direct Australian jobs in the car industry now at risk, and a further 200,000 jobs which rely indirectly on the industry on the line. And we think that there is a fight worth having in this country to protect not only Australia's manufacturing capabilities, but to ensure that the people that have jobs in this sector keep them. And we will do everything we can to stop these cuts to the automotive transformation scheme. And we certainly are calling on the crossbench and minor parties to stick up for Australian jobs too. We think they're worth fighting for, and we believe that they should fight for them as well. It's also worth noting that in doing so and in maintaining the sector, it's worth bearing in mind 4 in 10 of Australia's top-selling cars locally made. People want to see Australian cars produced. And certainly the impact of the dollar can't be discounted. It's increased production costs by the tune of 30%, and Holden has had to confront that, as have other companies as well. But only 13 countries, including Australia, can make a car from start to finish. Every single one of them supports their industry. And in this country, the amount that we support the sector by is a mere $17.40 per capita. That's the cost of the car industry support for Australians. And then you look at other parts of the world, and what are they doing? Well, if you look in Germany, it's $90. $17 here, $90 in Germany. You look in America, $264 extended to the auto industry there, and if you're in Sweden, $334. So for the mere cost, per capita cost of $17.40, this government is withdrawing that support and as a result seeing those jobs go. And they are happy to see those jobs go because they want to pursue ideology instead of protecting people's jobs right here in this country. And it is something that people should be well aware that not only did they fail to meet their promise of protecting these jobs, but for those people in the public that think, well, okay, maybe it is a lot to support this sector, maybe we are investing too much, the minute they recognise that other countries are supporting their industries way more than what we're doing, people recognise that this is not so much a bad proposition whatsoever, it's actually something that is worth following up. Because you then wonder, if those jobs go, what happens to the people who lose their jobs? Instantaneously, they will need to turn for support. Because bear in mind, there are jobs in the broader economy that are there to support them now. As I mentioned a few moments ago, unemployment higher now than what it was during the GFC. And so, if they're turning to support, what is the cost to the public purse of that? Well, the indication is that welfare payments plus lost tax revenue from an industry shutdown will be projected to exceed $20 billion. So for the $500 million that this government saves in the short term, we lose $20 billion in total. And it will be more than 10 years before the economy recovers from the underlying hit to GDP as a result of this short-sighted decision. And a decision that is founded upon deceit, because it was founded upon a suggestion extended to the Australian public that Tony Abbott, that the Prime Minister, would be there in tough times for the auto industry, and the minute he got into office, the job he was more interested in was his own and not the jobs of those auto manufacturing workers who needed him to be there. And in gross regional product in parts of the country, like Australia and Melbourne, they will not recover until 2031, 2 decades away. 2 decades away. And what are they supposed to do in the meantime? Now, you look at the reaction from the sector, and I've had drawn to my attention an article that appeared in The Age last month. Sorry, not last month, in August. We've already hit October. Last month we had, or in August I should say, Holden warned that the local car industry could crash early as a result of proposed cuts to the federal government's funding scheme. This is what Holden's saying. The company's managing director, Jerry DeRizas, has delivered the bleak assessment, fearing that the underlying component suppliers, not the manufacturers, were vulnerable without the additional funding that I've talked about in my contribution to the House. And to quote him, he says, "Suppliers have invested based on the ATS to break even. They needed this kind of subsidy, and at this particular time they're in dire straits." And he continues by saying, this is the reason why we're actually very focused on the supply base, because if that happens, then nobody will be able to produce cars, especially for the parts specific to Australia. So again, I make the point that there are these flow-on effects from the bill that we're discussing right now, debating right now, and there are real jobs on the line, and this will have a complete impact on the sector. And if you look, for example, at the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries, they oppose these cuts, and they say that reducing the scheme will have serious consequences for 45,000 workers directly employed, more than 100,000 indirectly employed in the sector, and they've called on the Parliament to reject this bill. And they say that it's important that the government realise the impact any cut to the scheme would have on the automotive supply chain, because they've already factored in the funding. And to quote them, if this bill passes Parliament, it will reduce the ATS by $900 million, they claim, and intensify financial pressure on the automotive supply chain at a time when they're trying to transition to a new environment. So this government that says it's there for jobs is doing everything it can to affect jobs. They have, on that side of the chamber, deceived the Australian public, deceived auto workers, and now they're trying to mask courage, or they're trying to mask cowardice with courage, claiming something that they weren't prepared to tell the public before the election.